from Yerushalayim is Rav Emanuel Feldman, a famous Orthodox rabbi. He was famously Rav in Atlanta for many years. He's written many books, some of which I've actually read. I love the story about, well, let's not go into that. But I've read, we'll edit out any of these. And his
Let me hear the story you love.
I love this story about the lady who was in the front of the pew when you were introducing somebody, I believe, who wasn't very, a particular person who didn't have such a good reputation, and she kept shaking her head back and forth.
Oh yeah.
That was, yeah.
That was a eulogy I was giving
about
a deceased person, and she was shaking her head because she knew that guy and he didn't deserve the eulogy. Okay, let's get going.
Okay, and his son, Rabbi Ilan Feldman, who's currently the Rav of the large Orthodox community in Atlanta. Welcome, Rabbi Feldman. Rabbi Emanuel, how important is it for you that your son follow in your footsteps?
Well, it was not just a matter of importance. It was a tremendous privilege to have our son follow. It wasn't always guaranteed that he would, but his following in my synagogue pulpit meant that the things I had tried to build up over the years would be enhanced, would be continuing to be built, and would be continued, even improved upon. So that is very, very important that that what I tried to establish was being continued.
And this is for Rabbi Ilan Feldman. How did you deal with that pressure and not feel that you were sort of living in your father's shadow? And how did it allow you to create your own identity, notwithstanding the fact that you were following in his footsteps and really following something that was of great importance to him?
Yeah, it's a good question. I wouldn't call it pressure. First of all, I inherited, thank God, from my parents, may they live and be well. I inherited a very a matter-of-fact kind of a disposition towards Rabbanus, which means I didn't think it was any big deal. In retrospect, I see that through others' eyes, it might have been seen as a big deal, but from our point of view, it was just, okay, this is a job to do. And I never felt that I had to live up to an expectation from my parents. What I dealt with mostly, if there was anything negative, it was from people in the shul who would start meetings with your father always or your father never, or that kind of a thing. And over the years, I've learned to actually enjoy that. I walk into a hospital room to visit somebody who's sick, and I've been the rabbi for 30 years, 29 and a half years, and I walk into the room and the first thing out of their mouth is, "How's your father?" So, which is fine. It's, thank God, but it's an interesting experience. Yeah.
So let me follow that up, Rabbi Ilan. How important is it for children to feel that they are creating their own identity? Like, is that important, or do you just say, brakari davua? Like, is it important for a child to feel, hey, this is my identity, I've created this, I'm separate, I'm individual?
I don't think so. When you put it in those terms, I would say the two ways of taking that. My own identity means the whole thing's about me. How do I look? How do I compare? With my better or my worse? Especially in Rabbanus, you're going to fail totally if you're worried about you. You always worry about you, but that can't be the big issue. If you're worried about the mission, and that's what my father was referring to, I think, before, when you're worried about the mission and what the cause is, so then it's not about, identity. It's just about, what do I stand for? So I was lucky enough to step into a Shulchan Aruch. My father and my mother together set up an unstated set of rules and expectations about what a Rav and what leadership is like in our community. And so I walked into a set table so that, for example, at board meetings, it was natural for them to say, pass a resolution, and they would say, subject to approval by the rabbi. Now that don't happen in most places, excuse the English. That's but that's because there was a certain respect and reverence, and my father really had set this up in a certain way. So it was very, but it wasn't about my own identity.
So you're saying that the din yafa koyach haben mikoyach av, the carbon aid is pshat, that he inherits and able to build on his shoulders, you Makayim.
Yeah, but Baruch Hashem, I feel it every day, literally every day, that I'm sitting or standing kaviyachol on my father's shoulders. Yeah.
So Rabbi Emanuel, as a sort of a senior rabbi, right, a statesman for Rabbanis, and Rabbanim are very involved in their constituents' families. So the Navi says, at least according to a few Rishonim, that it says, "V'heshiv leiv avos albanim." When Elio comes, the first thing he's going to be busy with is repairing the relationships between fathers and children, according to some Shatim. As a senior Rav who's probably sat through so many family, mediations and conflicts, why is it so hard for fathers and sons to get along that this has to be the first thing Elio rectifies when he comes?
Well, a very good question. I want to answer on several levels, but we only have a few minutes. But let me answer number one. First of all, we can read that pasuk from Malachi, Heshiv leiv avos albanim, not just the rectifying of relationships between fathers and sons, but it could also mean in a deeper sense that when Eliyahu Hanavi comes, he will make it possible for us today to go back to the verities of the Avos, of Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Leiv Avos Albanim, we'll understand who the Avos really were, and we'll accept them and make them part of our lives. That's a shot of what Malachi may have meant. He may have also meant on the other level that fathers and sons will be able to see eye to eye on things. It's always a problem because generations see things differently. The younger generation invariably sees things differently from what their fathers and mothers see things. It takes a very, very skilled parent to be able to convince a child that they're not behind the times, that they are really ahead of the times, and so forth. So in my own case, we were very fortunate that Rabbi Ilan and I never had problems about Ovos Abanim. We always see eye to eye. And if we don't see exactly eye to eye, we manage because each of us has somewhat a different perspective on things. But fundamentally, within the framework of Torah, we feel that, as my wife and I both feel, that our children should be able to have a certain amount of flexibility and do whatever they need to be done within the framework of Torah. So once that's done, you're ready for Mashiach, because that means it's very, very difficult to do. But once you get it done, Heshiv leiv avos albanim.
And so, Rabbi Ilan, continuing that theme, if you were to speak to the thousands of fathers listening to this and say, Elio's not here yet, but until then, this is what you can do so that you have less to repair when Elio comes, what would that be?
In a sentence, I would say, do not look at your son as a reflection of you, and don't let your son think that you want him to do well so that you look good or so that you can be proud. Make sure your son understands that you are invested in him in his own way, in his own derech, to choose his path, because you want him to succeed, because it's about him. It's not about you.
This is precise. May I interrupt a second? Can I say something?
Yeah, of course.
I cannot give my father permission to interrupt.
Yeah, I was going to say that this is one reason why the moment Ilan took over the pulpit, we left Atlanta and went to Israel. So he had some chance to spread his own wings without us looking over his shoulder, without me looking over his shoulder. And that, I think it meant a great deal to him just for us not to be around, at least for that first year, which we took a sabbatical. And that's the point. It's not about us, it's not about him, it's about the mission that we're trying to accomplish. I'm sorry I interrupted you, but then again, a father has certain privileges.
So let me continue this, Rabbi Emanuel. Is it a child's job to bring nachas to their parents? And does a parent have a right to say, look, your goal is to make me happy and satisfied? Is that a proper attitude towards parenting or not?
I think it's a very improper attitude. It's a very selfish, self-seeking attitude. That's not the job of a child to bring nachas to his parents. It's the job of a child to grow up and to be a mensch, to be a good Jew in the case of Jews, and to learn the Torah and keep it and so forth and so on. If that brings nachas, well and good, but that's not the idea. The purpose is to be a mensch and a good Jew.
Okay. Let me ask you both. I'll ask Rabbi Ilan. As a rabbi of a community, and I understand it's quite a large community, how are you able to balance your obligations to family with obligations to the community? Because a Rav is on duty very often 24, literally 7, including Shabbos, right? And the children shouldn't feel that in some way they were deprived of the intimate relationship that would otherwise exist, or time, etc.
Yeah, it's a very good question. And first of all, I think that my wife would answer how I was able to balance differently than I would answer how I was able to balance. All I can tell you is that when I was either absent or not regularly available to my kids, whether it was anything from private learning time to bath time to homework time to just playing together, whatever it is, when I wasn't or couldn't, I tried very hard not to say, I'm sorry, I'm busy, the shul, there's an emergency, somebody's sick in the hospital, because I realized that immediately I would be telling them that it's either them or me. In other words, and I didn't want them to feel like I was, that I had two competing interests. So I would simply, I would not explain. I would simply say, I'll be home later, or I won't be able to learn tonight, or something like that. But it wasn't somebody else won over you. Obviously, when there are emergencies and things like that, they understood it. But when I grew up, for example, in my parents' home, I never had the feeling that that my father's calling somehow came at my expense. Even though when I look back, I know there were many, many times when he was not where he wanted to be in terms of the family, but I never had that sense that it came at my expense. I think that's the all too often when we are busy with one thing and can't do another, we blame the thing we're busy with. And that tells the other person that they're in competition. And children don't want to be in competition with anybody else for their parents.
Okay.
May I add to that from the parent's perspective? As Ilan says, there's inevitably in the life of a rabbi is going to be conflicting times where he's just not available to his wife or children. But one day of the week, he is available, and that should be Shabbos. So we have tried, my wife and I tried over the years to severely limit the guests that we would have at our table on Friday night and or Shabbos, severely limit, because that was the only time that we could spend time with our children. Sometimes we didn't see them all week. They're busy, I was busy, so forth. But then when you have like 4 or 5 guests or even one guest on a Friday night, the natural tendency of the host is to give your attention to the guest, make them comfortable and so forth and so on. And you lose the focus of your children. So therefore, that was one, it's not a secret, but it's one fact that we try to live by as a growing family, is to give our attention to the children on Friday nights and Shabbos as much as possible, even though that meant that we were not able to host many, many people on Shabbosim.
Fascinating. Rabbi Emanuel, let me continue. What do you value most about your relationship with Rav Ilan?
That's a very good question. I mean, how much do I love you? Let me count the ways. There's so many things I value most about him. First of all, he's a very, very good rabbi, which in every way, he's compassionate, he's learned, he cares, he's organized, and so forth. So he does a very, very good job as a rabbi. He has great talents. And what I value most is his integrity, his intellectual honesty, and his genuine piety, his genuine frumkeit. It's not something he wears on his sleeve, but he's genuinely a Yerei Shomayim, as is his wife. And without a good wife like that, I know that because I have a good wife. Without a good wife like Rabbi Ilan has, all the integrity in the world is not going to get you to a cup of coffee. He has a great deal of integrity. People recognize it. They recognize his leadership qualities, and that gives us great nachas.
And Rabbi Ilan, let me ask you the same question. What do you value most about your relationship with your father, Tzalanga Yarin?
Well, I can honestly say that the title Avi Umari really fits. In other words, I feel like my parents and my father as a Rav set such a model in a natural way. My father rarely ever directly told me something about life or what should be done or shouldn't be done, but in his casual, relaxed way, just modeled standards. And so what I value the most is the hadracha that I received without knowing that I was receiving hadracha. So that, and to this day, the older I get, Baruch Hashem, I'm zocheh to be, I am now older than my father was when he retired. But now, as the older I get in this position, the more chachma I realize my father had in terms of just setting an example. So that's what I value the most, is just the fact that my father managed to set a standard in a natural way, without speeches, without tension, without assertion, just being.
Okay, so Rabbi Ilan, let me ask you a question that I had previously asked your father, but I'd like your take on it. If you had to give some advice to parents, two or three, you want to have really good, you don't want to have the problem that Elio is going to fix, what would it be? What would that advice sound like?
Well, I think I don't want to repeat myself, but I'll add something. You take yourself out of the picture. It cannot be about how it looks. You don't want it shouldn't be about what the neighbors think. It shouldn't be what it looks like in the community. It needs to be simply working with each individual child. And every child likes to feel like they have their own derech. And and therefore, a parent needs to identify and support the uniqueness of each child, and be willing to let that child's uniqueness be expressed, even though it might not be the personality of the parent. So, and sometimes one sibling will be dramatically different from the other, and they'll be products of the same household, and you have to kind of work with the personality as opposed to trying to get them to conform. And I don't want to get too carried away here, but I would just say that conformity is one of the worst things in the world. And we in the Frum community, as we know, we struggle very much with the pressures of conformity, but that conformity ends up turning people into measuring themselves by others, and then they have no self. So a parent wants to give a child the child's self, and that means knowing their uniqueness and going with it.
Let me just add to that. You see, Avram was Midas HaChesed, and Yitzchak is Midas Hadin, which is black and white, 180 degrees removed. And yet, Ela told us Yitzchak ben Avram. Avram Hailadus Yitzchak. And Yaakov sort of finds what advice would both Rabbanim give? We talk about giving, a theme here has been giving their child their own identity, not superimposing your ego on theirs. Look at them as individuals. What do we do when a child wants to leave Darkei Avaisav? When he doesn't say Masi Agiyu Maise Lamaise Avaisai, but he wants to leave. Do we still respect that child's wishes or not? We're not talking about a young child. We're talking about maybe an older teenager, somebody where he already has his own bechira in a way. He's his own person. How do we deal with it then, from a chinuch point of view? Rav Emanuel, do you want to take a try?
The reason I was silent is because it's a very, very difficult question. It happens all too often today in the United States. It has happened in the past, but it's happening more often today in the United States than ever. And I don't really have a good solution to that, because the thing is this: one has to raise a child from the time the child is born until he grows up to try to avoid such things. In other words, if you follow all the directives that Rav Ilan just mentioned, let the child be an individual, but keep certain reins and certain frameworks in what he's doing, then you can avoid that. But when a child is 17 or 18, he's no longer a child, he's almost an adult, he's really an adult, and he wants to go off the derech, it's very, very difficult. One thing one should not do is cut ties with him. One should maintain close relationships with him no matter what he does. One should keep working with him. One should not be obvious that he's working with him. I still love you, or maybe learn with him. There are all kinds of things that one can do. But the ikar, the main thing is to try to prevent the thing from happening years and years before it happens. But I'll let Rabbi Ilan has more immediate experience with this in his rabbinate, because remember, I've been out of the pulpit for 28 or 29 years now. Anyway, give it over to Rabbi Ilan for his analysis.
I apologize for asking the hard questions, but if we're not going to ask our most experienced senior Rabbanim, who are we going to ask these questions to?
And your experienced senior Rabbanim says he doesn't know. Okay.
I would add to my father's words. I would say that first of all, let's get the landscape. A parent is confronted with a 17, 18-year-old who either in action or actually in words says that he's just not buying into this and he doesn't want to live this way. But first of all, the parent's got to deal with himself, as we were saying, and the parents got to realize this is not about you. This is about the child's well-being. First of all, being straight. In so many words, the child's got to understand, I, the father, believe in absolutely, positively, without any question, that there is a Borei Olam and there's a Torah, and that we're created to live for this. And I believe that one who doesn't live according to the Torah has no reason to live. And you will only discover that on your own. You will never discover that because I said so. I didn't discover that because my father said so. I discovered that on my own. I was given the opportunity to discover that. So therefore, I love you. And because I love you, I want you to live your life as a frum Jew. And I will continue my relationship with you till the end of days, unless you are impudent or offensive, or unless you are destructive. But other than that, I have to have some boundary with the rest of the family. But other than that, I will continue. You know what I believe in, emes lamito, and meanwhile, I want you to be able to explore so that you will come to the emes on your own. If I can help you, please let me. If I can't, there's nothing I can do. But one has to be straight and blunt about it. I think the love the prevalent wisdom now is, and I think it makes a lot of sense, love has got to be shown. The tough love of get out of my house, I love you, but you can't live here. doesn't work because most of the children at that age who are wandering off the derech are not doing so intellectually. The intellectual deviations are not what drives kids. What drives kids is hypocrisy, meanness, inconsistency, either in the adults in their lives or in the community themselves. And kids can't stand inconsistency. So what they need is love. They don't need any intellectual arguments.
Very powerful.
Yeah.
Rabbi Emanuel, how would you be mechanech a son who's struggling with the inconsistencies he may see in his community?
Well, you first of all, if he sees inconsistencies in you, then you have a problem. So you, that is the father himself, has got to live a consistent life. He can't tell the son to go daven in the morning minyan and while he's still staying in bed. He can't tell the son not to smoke, for example, while he's smoking. So he's got to be consistent in himself. The son will notice the consistency and will act accordingly. So that's number one step, is you as a father have to live a consistent life. As Rav Ilan says, there's nothing that turns a kid off more than seeing phoniness. And you've got at least to find non-phoniness or integrity within his home. You've got to keep playing on that, on the fact, on the consistency of integrity of your own life.
I want to pick up on that, and this is actually kind of personal, and I know there are, any number of people will be watching this, but I think it's worth sharing. There was, with one of my sons, there was a time when I felt that he was very distant from me and would not even walk near me when we walked to shul or anything like that. So one day I confronted him, so to speak, and I said, I want to know what's going on. Why I slow down, you slow down. I speed up, you speed up. We come into a bris, you never walk in with me. What's going on? And he didn't want to tell me. Finally, after a continued request, I implored him to let me know what's bugging you. He said to me these words, very, very quietly, you speak too much Lashon Hara. Now, I think I'm very careful about Lashon Hara. My wife and I are very careful not to talk about people and things and frustrations. At that moment, I was confronted with something, and in an instant, I knew this could be a life changer. Either I say to him, but I'm careful about Lashon Hara. No, I don't. You're misunderstanding. We don't speak Lashon Hara, I'm against Lashon Hara. Or I could say, you are right. I am working on it. It's something that I have to deal with and something I want to do better on. And in so doing, I'm giving my son an example of reality, which is no parent has it all together. No parent has everything all worked out. And every parent has avoda. And so that's what I did. I said to him, I'm so glad you mentioned it. It's something that I need to work on, and I'm going to do better and better with the help of Hashem. I don't know if that made a difference. I don't even know if that son remembers that conversation. But for me, it was a major deal because I realized then I was given an opportunity to demonstrate how an adult struggles and strives and grows.
Wow. Well, what an honor to have two great Rabbanim. And I think you tackled a lot of difficult topics. And on behalf of everybody, I'd like to thank you for sharing so many private thoughts. Thank you so
very much. You're a great interviewer. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rabbi.